Yo, what's up, guys? The Insane Game Freak here to kind of talk about kind of more Nintendo Switch stuff, but also kind of relating it back to the Wii and the DS and the appeal that third parties might have on the Switch, going back to the 3DS and DS eras. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, if you're not pursuing power, then you're not going to get any games. But people got to realize there's a lot of mid-tier to low-tier developers who cannot afford to put out AAA HD looking fucking games all the time, which is why you always have the situation that's been happening a lot this generation where the 3DS would get like a game from a third party publisher and then like you would see like the sequel on PlayStation 4. And that's only really because it's not necessarily, and part of that I think is bull, but I think realistically the reason why is because to third party developers is more of a risk to put out a third party game on a Nintendo console, especially when you look at the Wii U situation, where the Wii U literally sold worse than the other two, even though it came out like a year earlier. I mean, it was kind of tied for um, it was kind of tied with the PlayStation. I think it was outselling the PlayStation in Japan at least consistently for a little while, and then it recently just got taken over like a few months ago. Xbox One, it was pretty closer to in sales, but the problem is that demographic wasn't really built up, and I think that's the biggest problem Nintendo consoles have had is that it's always such a struggle for us to get third party games is partially due to the fact that we never got a consistent build up of certain franchises, and the ones we did, it was never the same entries that you got on the PlayStation 3 and 360. So like we have weak Call of Duties, but some people kind of view that as a kind of a subgenre of Call of Duty because of the way you play that version of Call of Duty. But getting back into the whole appeal of the Switch in terms of third parties, is that all this thing has to do is sell at least a decent amount out the gate and consistently sell. If Nintendo can get this to consistently sell out the gate, third party wise it'll be fine. And I think we'll just go back to what near it'll be a good mix of like the Wii and the GameCube days. Because the Wii had a lot of fucking games that either A didn't work on any other console or B were so low budget that, you couldn't really throw in another console without the first thing being drawn attention to was the graphics. Um, I think we all heard that throughout the PS360 days, there were a lot of like mid-tier, low-tier companies, and the few AAA companies just completely just bowing out and saying fuck it because they couldn't. Because you don't understand, especially considering how expensive third-party games are getting nowadays. You fuck up on a game once, and that's it. That's your whole fucking career. And that's why a lot of companies were shutting down. The advantage the DS and the Wii gave was the fact that they were consoles not only had larger install bases, but also were cheaper to make games for because they weren't as graphically extensive. I mean, the PlayStation 3 kind of went through growing pains where people kind of learned how to use the technology, but let's be real here. The PS3 still was a pain in the ass to develop for. It was literally just because it was like you put games on the Wii. You can't. Most Japanese developers' choices were either the Wii or the PS3 because the 360 was a piece of shit in terms of Japan. That's the one thing I never understood. That for some reason this console war, Xbox gets all this praise, but it's one of the only companies that doesn't even cater to like a decent chunk of fan base. It gets Japanese games, but never really goes into the Japanese market. And it's one of the reasons why people, I would say, the most like um the most unopen minded, like not unknown, but I guess the most closed minded gamer is like the Xbox gamer because they only play like two types of games. And I mean, hey, that's just a fact. Sony gamers, they're used to getting Japanese and very weird and different games, so you see a lot more variation in genres. Whereas in fucking Xbox, if there's no gun and no type of shooting in it, then you ain't selling any fucking copies of it on that console. Regardless of how well the console's selling. That's the one thing I never liked about Xbox is that it always catered to that one gamer and the people want to talk shit. And that's one of the reasons why I never bought it because it also caters to a genre I don't give a fuck about, let alone it's like the only genre it cares about. But I was getting back to the Wii and 360 stuff is that they're low tier consoles that sold well. And for a lot of developers, that's great because that means they don't have to put out these insanely graphically inducing games, and they also have the potential to make a lot of money. That's why we got games like Tatsunoko versus Capcom, why we got games like Muramasa and the Demon Blade, why we get games on the DS like The World Ends With You. Um, even in there, even now, we still have some 3DS specific franchises like Ace Attorney's been handheld since its inception. The Bravely series has been handheld only. Even I think even the newest game that's coming out is probably just going to be on smartphone, which still works in the Switch realm. And I think that's the point I'm trying to get across here, is that just because the Switch isn't going to be as strong as the PlayStation 4, that's not inherently a bad thing. Because now it means that it can get budget games. Now, some of you would say, well, the Wii U didn't get budget games. Well, the Wii U also didn't sell well. I think they still want the console. The console still has to sell enough to justify putting the game on the console. But and that's why the Wii got a whole bunch of games, some of which just got left in the dust, like something like Zack and Wiki. And then you got some unique games like Trauma Center that can only really work on the Wii, which is one of the reasons why I still believe that those Joy Cons are probably like new generation Wiimotes in their own right, because I don't inherently believe that when we go to the Switch, we're dropping all the eShop shit. I don't believe that. Also, and that's really the reason why I believe that we're still going to be doing motion controls and gyro, is because I don't think they're gonna ever really get rid of to have Wii games still be eShop games. You would have to do one or two things: keep the Wiimote-ish controls in your new controllers, or restructure almost every Wii game to play with just a normal controller. And some of those games just don't fucking work with normal controllers. They're just not fun. They're nowhere near as fun to do that. Um, but the advantage, but kind of just finishing that point off, is that budget games on a high selling console, who also are, which is kind of a budget console in a way, allows developers to take risks and be open with throwing new and unique gameplay ideas onto a console. It's the reason why we got those weird games and why the 3DS has a few franchises. And that's one of the reasons why I wasn't as worried about third party with the Switch as I was with the Wii U, because the Switch being a borderline handheld, being a half handheld, or at this point it's more like a 75-25 or more of like a 60-40 split. Um, I don't. That would imply that they're not going to do any more of those handheld IPs that have been exclusive to handhelds for years. I don't believe that. We're definitely getting another Etrian Odyssey game. We're definitely getting more Phoenix Wright games. I do not believe that those. And same thing with Monster Hunter. That's the cool thing about when you people always think about it in terms of Nintendo stuff, because they join their development groups teams together. So now all the development teams are just working on all games. It's not just like a simple, oh, you're working on the console and he's working on the handheld. You also got to remember third parties do the same thing, where third parties will use the money they make from the 3DS game to make the fucking PS4 and Xbox One game. A lot of people don't understand the importance of the 3DS and handheld market for like large companies, because they're usually using the money from those games to fund making the bigger games. That's why Capcom ported Street Fighter 4 or made Resident Evil Revelations, or what was that, Snake Eater? What was the Metal Gear Solid game? It was I think it might have been Snake Eater. I might be thinking of something else. I know there was a Metal Gear Solid game on the 3DS. I just don't remember what it was called. Um, it's the same thing. You take the money from that and the Castlevania game that we got, and then you do a few things with it. You either make a fucking, use that money to put in Street Fighter 5, use that money to port Revelations to consoles, use that money to fund the sequel, or fund on HD port, like I think they did with Mirror of Fates for Castlevania. That's the type of shit you do, and that's the advantage the Switch has. Because I think the Switch automatically will get those games, which will automatically put it at a higher tier than the Wii U was. Where the Wii U was suffering because it just was missing. It had almost the same problem as the three, as the Xbox does 90% of the time, where it doesn't have a good variety of genres. And I get it. Granted, the Wii U had better like exclusives in those genres, whereas the Xbox just kind of got it with the PlayStation console guy, which doesn't really mean much, because no one in the right mind is going to buy a Japanese RPG on a fucking Xbox console, because Xbox hasn't raised a RPG fan base on those consoles. The only reason why you'll get those fan bases on the consoles because A, it's another console to play it on, and B, they might just like the controller better, which really doesn't mean too much in an RPG setting, unless we're talking about all these fucking action RPGs that we've been getting. Um, and that's kind of the thing. It doesn't need to sell amazing. It just needs to sell well enough because the games and I'm pretty sure Nintendo's already learned their lesson in terms of first party games, which is why they've been so like we're gonna release games out for it, but we're not going to release the console until the games are ready. They want this thing to come out the door kicking. And there's been rumors of this thing landing somewhere between $250 and $300, which are I think fine price points. I mean, granted, I don't mind spending $350 for it, but at the same time, if I can get it for cheaper, that's great. You give me a budget console, it's the cheapest. You give me the cheapest option for a console that has all my handheld third party games on it and is a lower tier so it doesn't cost developers as much to make the games. And it's like I said, if it sells at least decently enough, that means you're still getting a lower profitability off of those games. And hopefully, unlike the Wii U situation, when they do make their console variant of those games, we'll get those too. That's the advantage the Switch has, is that the Switch not only can house the 3DS or the DS type game that makes the money, but also hopefully uh, house the fucking eventual either HD port or HD sequel for that game. That was the problem. That was the disconnect between the 3DS and the Wii U. The 3DS would house all these games, and then like the Wii U would never get the console variants of them. So it just literally felt like the 3DS would get all, and that's really because the 3DS was the highest selling console, and you didn't have to do as much to get those games to sell. And that's a whole big thing that people need to understand is that I don't necessarily agree that the Wii U should have got shafted as much as it did. At the same time, I understand that they were way more confident in putting those games on like the PS4 and Xbox One because those guys have consistently gotten those console ports and HD remasters, whatever the fuck you want to call them, and their audience is kind of groomed to that type of shit. It's not that Nintendo can't be, and that's one of the reasons why everybody wants to jump. And they know, and everybody's always looking at Nintendo for new console shit. That's one of the reasons why you have certain companies that'll jump on really early on because they're like, hey, this has potential to make a lot of money. Also, considering the Switch also works as a kind of a middleman from mobile to console because this thing is closer to the mobile market and it gives developers an easy way of trying mobile games out without actually delving into the mobile market. We already know a few companies do this anyway. I think Square Enix and Capcom. I know Sega does. There's a few companies that already put out mobile games. And I'm not necessarily saying we're going to get mobile games on the Switch, although I don't think it would hurt. Because then you really have, because even if it doesn't get all the third party in terms of the big HG console releases, you're still getting the casual shit. And some of you would say, well, if I don't want the casual shit, then don't fucking play it. It was the same thing with the Wii. You didn't have to play every fucking shovelware game that came out, but having them have the ability to port it to your console gave you another thing to play. And let's be real here. If they can get Minecraft to work on this thing, which I know they can, but like with touch controls, pretty much port the fucking iOS version of Minecraft on there, son. That's money in the bank right there. Shit, why do you think they're doing that? What is it? The smart glass shit with Xbox One with Minecraft when they did that shit in E3 because I bet you that the mobile versions of Minecraft either sell just as well as the console versions, if not more. It don't make no sense to not put mobile versions of games on there. Especially you could take some of the, and it will also get console gamers who don't like mobile games to play mobile games that I haven't to invest into like a tablet that they don't fucking use. I know that's kind of hard to believe, but I'm like one of those people who have a work tablet and still have no interest in playing like tablet games on it. But you put it on a console, where it's in a console environment, maybe add a few features for the console fan base. That's a fucking done deal. It works as a stopgap. It allows third parties to test their feet because they're all going to eventually have to delve into the mobile market if they still want to make money. Because with the console market constantly dwindling and with games becoming more and more expensive, it doesn't make any fucking sense to stick to the same dumbass rhetoric where you're putting out like a $50 million game every other year on the PS4 and Xbox that's forcing you to not only keep up with graphics but frame rates. And realistically, most companies are struggling to do either one, let alone both. More than likely, struggling to put out games that aren't buggy and glitchy. The games are also becoming bigger and bigger. It's become like there's so many things building on top of each other that we're just setting up for a crash. The Switch isn't like the all-in be-in savior, but provides the potential to create another avenue that doesn't kill their fucking that doesn't kill developers in putting out games. Why do you think that GTA games don't come out insanely often, or even like games like Red Dead Redemption? Because you can't make those games on a yearly basis. It's fucking insane. And when you try to make those games on a pseudo yearly basis, you get games that are inherently broken, which is what happened with Assassin's Creed. Watch Dogs to an extent suffered from that. There's a lot of open world games that just didn't really do as well because they're not having the time to chill out and put out the game. They're like, okay, we got to put out a game, but this game is way too big and it'll come out glitchy and stupid as shit if we don't like pace ourselves. But you can't pace yourself because you need to get paid, and you can't get paid unless you put out a game to make money, which is why you have microtransactions. The way the industry is currently working right now is fucking flawed as hell. You can't we can't and legitimately I think it's coming to the point where it's like you can't keep doing this shit. It's not like the industry is getting better because you brought up the PlayStation 4 Pro, guys. The only thing that does is bring out a new opportunity to make money, but which I think is the reason why Sony did that whole uh, we're not forcing third parties not to charge because they're probably going to charge. Some of you were like, no, they're not going to charge. I'm pretty sure they'll charge because it's another avenue to make money. And that's what the business is about, making fucking money. Do I think that's great? No, hell no. I don't fucking like that at all. To me, it just seems like I paid for a console to do these features, and it's essentially like paying for online. I bought a console that can do it, but I have to pay another party to unlock the feature in the console that the console was marketed for. So I want a PlayStation 4 Pro to play games and higher and close to the 4K resolution and possibly higher frame rates, but I have to pay the company who makes the game like a fucking key code pass amount to unlock their game to have that feature. It's fucking stupid. But then again, the gaming industry's been paying for things they should have been paying for in the first place, and then get mad when the system comes back and fucks them in the ass, supposedly. I don't fucking know. But please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. Patreon, Twitter, Facebook in the description below. Life's a game, play to win, and I will catch you guys later. Peace up.